welcome back to the garage. Today we're going to take on the daunting task of replacing the springs in the African Twin. So this is the Hyperpro progressive springs, which adds 20 millimeters to the height. We're also going to replace the spring of the rear shock. That'll be a different video. But first let's take the front. First of all, I have to apologize today for the incredibly poor sound that's probably going to come out of this. I've misplaced my microphone adapter for the camera, so we're just doing the inboard sound today. Hopefully you'll be able to hear. If not, I'll put on some text or something. So in order to replace the springs, we're also going to replace the fork seals, dust seals, and the fork oil, obviously. So in order to do this, we first have to remove the front fender, the front wheel, and the front speed sensor from the bike in order to get the forks out. So let's go ahead and grab a fork out and we'll see how this goes. So first off, let's get rid of this fender cover. Just remove the bolts. There's also a collar on the back side of this. And then it snaps off at the back here. And there's the collar. And then we're gonna remove this. There are two clips, top and bottom here. Use a flat blade screwdriver. And just peel it out. Clips on back there. And then you take it off. Then remove the speed wire sensor from the fender, sitting in like that. And there are some nuts up here to remove this from the fender. That's a small bolt, and then take it out like that. Next up, remove the bolts from down here. And then repeat the process on the other side. And that's it. And then you can remove the fender. Like that. With that out of the way, we can also remove the front speed sensor. Be careful with that one. Now, in order to remove the front wheel, it's necessary to remove one of the calipers. Doesn't really matter which one. Then remove the caliper and support that so you don't put strain on the brake lines, like that. Next up, we'll remove the front wheel, just loosen off the tension bolts and the axle pinch bolts. And the axle nuts. And then loosen up the pinch bolts on the other side. Drive out the axle. And we can go ahead and remove the other caliper. And support that as well. Next up is to loosen the upper pinch bolts on the fork leg. And then, since we'll be disassembling the fork completely, it's smart to loosen up this nut just a bit before we loosen off the bottom pinch bolts and remove the fork leg. Next up, we'll grab a hold of the fork, loosen the bottom pinch bolts, and then pull the fork leg down. And then gently pull out the fork like that. Okay, so once we have the fork leg out of the bike, we need to loosen up the fork bolt. It's time to get some gloves on. This is quite a messy job. There's a lot of fork oil in here. Since we loosened it up before we took it off, it should come quite easy. Like that. And then just lower the outer pipe until it rests on the, slowly, until the dust seal rests on the front axle holder. Like that. So inside here there is a spring collar, and underneath here there is a locking nut, which we need to get to. So in order to do that, we need some kind of tool to compress the spring collar. And then we need a stopping plate, which goes in between the spring collar and the locking nut as soon as we lower it down. It's not too hard, so you'll easily be able to do this yourself. Like that. So now you can see the locking nut up here, resting on the stopping plate, holding down the spring collar. So next up we have the tray to pour out the oil. We're going to remove the front fork, the front bolt assembly, which is on the top here. There is a pin going down, obviously inside here. So we pull that out, it starts pouring oil, so we'll throw it in there and dry it off. Have some shop towels or paper towels or something available for it. Need to hold back on the locking nut, which is a 14mm nut there, and then unscrew it. Pull it out slowly because there will be oil coming out here. In order to try not to make too big of a mess. That. And just put that aside. Next up, we remove the collar stopper here, the white one. Just dry that off. All the items should be thoroughly clean before assembling it again. And then we can remove the stopper plate. And collar tool.
remove the collar. There is a lot of oil on the bottom of that. Stuff that in there. So next now is to drain the oil, pour it out, pumping the outer pipe a couple of times to get the oil out, and then pumping the fork damper several times in order to get most of the oil out. It's going to be messy anyways. Comes the spring and everything. And we'll just let that sit and drip for a while. So once that has dripped off for a while, you can lift it up. Put it in a vise with soft grips, or a shop towel around it or something. So once we have it up in a vise, we can remove the center bolt from the bottom, together with a copper sealing washer, and then we'll take out the damper assembly from the fork. And this is what that looks like. also have the rebound screw going up, and we'll be replacing the copper washer when we assemble it again. Then we can remove the damper assembly together with the centering plate, which should be in here somewhere. Yeah, it's sitting inside the pipe. So we'll just try to get the centering plate out. There you go. This is the centering plate, which sits on the damper assembly, guiding it in to the bottom before the center bolt goes in. So first thing is to remove the dust seal with a flat blade screwdriver. Be careful not to scratch the pipes. Should come out fairly easily. Like that. And then on the inside here, I don't know how well you can see it, but there is a stopping ring which has a gap in it. So the gap is up here. There are some detents and you can use to pry that out. Again, be careful not to scratch the pipes. Smaller. Next up here is the oil seal, which we'll need to force out by pulling it on the busher inside here. Now, this can be a somewhat daunting task, but shouldn't take too much force. Some of you may have read on the internet that there is an issue with the inside of the Africa Twin Forks. Some premature wear issue. We're gonna take a good inspection in here while we have it open, and see what we can find. Now on inside the fork here, there is the slider bushing with the slider material on the outside, and there is a guide bushing which has the slider material on the inside. There is a stopper ring, an oil seal, this clip, and the dust seal. Everything, I'll be taking everything off since I'll be replacing these two anyway. Officially, according to the manual, you're not supposed to remove the slider bushing unless you're replacing it. Yeah, this one is okay, plenty of material left. I'll be reusing that, but I will be removing it because taking all the other stuff across it is not exactly the easiest task. These two bushings have a split. The flat blade screwdriver, don't force it more than you need to, and then just slide them off the leg. Like that. If you get any burrs on the edge here, be sure to remove those before you reassemble it. Next up is the guide bushing here, which has the gliding material on the inside, so inspect that for wear. This one looks quite okay. Reusing that. And there is a stopping ring here. And the oil seal. We're not going to be reusing this, but if we, for some odd reason, would want to, you'll need to tape up this in order to take it off without risking damage to the seal. So that's the OEM oil seal. Remember, the dotted ones here go down towards the axle holder. That one goes up. Looks okay. And the clip that holds the oil seal. And the dust seal. That also looks okay. Now, before reassembly, we need to give all of this a good clean. You can use fork cleaner if you have it, or use brake cleaner. Just make sure you air it out well before you reassemble everything. Won't be boring you with that. So after giving all this proper clean, we can do the inspection of the inside of the outer pipe. I don't know how well you can see this on video, but the problem lies down there if you look at the, let's see if we can get a full white background here. If you look at the top of the leg, approximately where the light is now, you should be able to see. I'll try to take a picture and post it in here. As you can probably see from the picture, I don't think it's too bad. This fork has run with a stock setup for around 17,000 kilometers. The wear has no impact in my mind, but again, I'm not a engineer. It looks okay. So it's time to put stuff back together. I'm going to be replacing the fork seal and the dust seal, the oil seal and dust seal, with the SKF green versions, which are, well, they're known to be quite good. So we'll see if that makes any difference. Getting the order correctly is, of course, important. And we also need to use some electrical tape to seal up the sharp edges where the slide busher sits, in order not to damage the oil seal and dust seal and stuff. Putting a bullet on the outside to remove the risk of damaging anything on the top one there. That seems to work. Putting the dust seal in, this edge here obviously sits underneath the outer pipe, and put some fork oil on the lip inside there. If in doubt, lubricate. And put that all the way down. Then the clip for the oil seal. Next up, the oil seal. It's kind of hard to say which way this goes on, actually, because it's slightly different from the stock one. But there are some dots on the inside of the groove here. You can probably not see that on video. You might see it on video. Hard to say. There are some dots in here. Those go towards the axle holder or the dust seal or something. And again, put some fork oil on the inside here, on the lip. Be extra careful. Put this on here. That should be okay. And the stopper ring. Guide busher. Bushing, sorry. And then the slide bush here. Obviously remove the tape here before you put on the last bushing. And just give that a quick scrub. To remove any residue from the tape. snaps into place. Check again for burst when you use the screwdriver to remove it. Feels okay. Found one minor scratch down here somewhere on the lower part of the fork, so I did some wet and dry sanding, lightly, and that cleaned up fine, so no issues there. So then it's just a matter of getting the outer pipe installed. And getting the oil seal to sit inside there. To do this, there are several different methods you can use. The proper one is to use a seal driver like this. And give it some good kicks down. You want to keep driving it in until you can see the groove on the inside here for the locking clip. It goes in there. Now that's visible all the way around. And reinstall the clip. Make sure it sits in the groove all the way around. And then drive in the dust seal. You should go in with no problems. Like that. Next up is to install the fork damper assembly and the centering plate, which just sits on the outside like that. In order to get this in without losing that one on the way, try lowering the fork in the vise, so you will be pushing it upwards. Doesn't need to be more than slightly. And then we'll be installing the center bolt in the bottom, replacing the copper washer. This is the part number for the new one. reinstalling it with the center plates on the back like that, you won't be able to reach all the way through. So if you have something like this, which is a tool in order to reach this one inside, you can screw that on to give yourself a little bit more material to work with. And then it's just a matter of aiming it in. Sound it right. And then torque this one up to 34 Newton meters. Now here's a twist. We're going to pour in the fork oil. Be aware that if you run the Honda stock springs in there, the measurement is like 725 milliliters, reaching 95 millimeters from the top of the outer pipe when rested on the dust seal towards the front axle holder. With Hyperpro springs, the measurement is 180 millimeters from the top here, so the oil goes up somewhere around here, and that equals to around 600 milliliters. So I'll be putting in probably like 620, 630, 640 or something like that, and then use a measurement afterwards and pull out the oil, so I reach down to 180. So let's pour in something. That was 400. And we'll take 200 and something from here. That should do it. Now, the important thing is to get the air out of the oil. And there are two operations needed to do that. First off, 2 or 3 times move the outer pipe all the way up, cover it, press down so you feel the pressure, slowly. You'll hear it bubble on the inside. Do that 2 or 3 times. Like that. And then we'll use the
the arm for the damper assembly inside here. And we'll drive this up and down 8 to 10 times. Remember to do it slowly because there are small pinholes in the rod itself. So if you push down too hard, the oil will squirt out from there. Like that, and then we'll just leave it there for 5 minutes to let it set.
So I mentioned it before that the Hyperpro springs take a lot less oil than the OEM springs. So the measurement for the OEM is 95 millimeters from the top of the outer pipe, while as the Hyperpro springs takes 180 millimeters, so there's a lot less oil. So that's approximately 600 milliliters as compared to 725 on the stock setup. So put this down, and the intake will be 180 millimeters down into the pipe, and then we'll just suck out. There we go.
Okay, so now that's been sitting for a little while for the oil to set. Fairly sure there are no air bubbles. So next up we'll be installing the Hyperpro spring. Be aware that the tightly wound part up here on the stock spring from Honda that goes towards the bottom
but with the Hyperpro that goes towards the top to reduce the amount of unsprung weight at the bottom. So that goes in there. And then pull up that part and reinstall the extension, just because it's practical. And then on top here, I'll be installing the collar. Goes down there, and the small stopper goes on top. The next part is where you might want to get a friend to help you or something. It is doable, but it's much easier if you're two up. Put the tool down to hold the collar. Hold the damper out as high as you can get it. Get the stopper plate ready. And you'll want to install this so that the stopper here comes underneath the locking nut. So the trick is to manage to hold this up like that, and push down. Install the stopper plates. Like that. Make sure that the lock nut sits flush at the bottom of the threads in there. Next we'll remove the extension. And then we'll get ready to install the fork bolt assembly. Up here there is an O-ring. According to Honda, you should replace this whenever you disassemble and install it. That's the part number for the new O-ring. Lubricate it with some fork oil. Like that. And slowly push that in. When that's installed, go ahead and torque up the fork to 20 Newton meters. And use a 14mm to hold the lock nut. Like that. Then go ahead and remove the stopper plate and the collar tool. Next up, just get the fork bolts seated in the outer pipe. Like that. And we'll be torquing that up when we get it on the bike. Then we go ahead and install the fork up through the triple clamps. Like that. Until the outer pipe is flush with the top clamp there. And go ahead and just tighten up the bottom pinch bolts. And go ahead and torque these up to 25 Newton meters. Torquing pinch bolts like these, torque one, torque the other, and torque the second one again. If you go back and forth, you'll be ending up with a much higher torque than you are supposed to, but doing it 1, 2, 3, that's sets them nicely. Go ahead and torque the fork bolt up to 35 Newton meters. And then torque up the upper pinch bolts. Torque setting for those are 22 Newton meters. Alright, both the forks are back in the bike. I've set up the compression and the preload and the rebound according to the new Hyperpro specs. So we'll start from there and see how that works out. Before assembling everything, we're going to install some fork seal covers to give some further protection against mud and dirt. So these are from Kriega. Can sit nicely up here. They're very flexible, so there's some Velcro to get them on there. like that. And then there's a zip tie that can thread through here. Okay, so now that everything is in place, let's get the tire on first. I'm taking time to clean all the spacers, the axle, and the seals on the rim. So let's put that in. Axle there. Tighten now the pinch bolts on the right hand side first. The axle bolt on. Just tighten this up slightly. If you haven't done the front wheel before, there's a specific procedure where you tighten the pinch bolts on the right hand side, torque up the axle nut, then you torque up the pinch bolts on the left hand side, loosen up the pinch bolts on the right hand side, then you install the brakes and everything, pump it up a couple of times to seat the axle and everything, and then you torque up the right hand side at the end. So obviously we're going to do this in multiple steps. So torque up the axle nut to 60 Newton meters. So then we can install the brake calipers. On there. Put some thread lock on the caliper bolts. Get those torqued up to 45 Newton meters. And get the speed sensor routed behind the brake lights. Pump that up to 10 Newton meters. That's like almost not even hand tight, like that. And let's get the fender in. So up here we have the bolt for the stay here. And that also torques up to 10 Newton meters. Like that. And get the rubber grommet in there. Like that. Remember, these collars go on the back side here. And the speed sensor wire goes in between those two. Like that. And the same on the other side. And to get the fender cover on there, put in the collar there first. You see the grooves here and here. Take these three hoses and the speed wire. So that's the finished install of the Hyperpro plus 20mm progressive springs for the Africa Twin. Quite a job, as you can see, especially if you haven't done it before. This was my first time opening the forks on the Africa Twin. As some of you probably noticed, I did the first fork off camera to see what was going on, and then I filmed the second one. Hopefully this will work. I hope so. Now it's just a matter of lowering the bike, pumping it to seat the axle and everything, torque up the pinch bolts for the axle, and then we should be good to go. Next video will be to install the spring for the rear shock. So I hope this one helps someone, and I'll see you in the next video.